Welcome to Asake Online. My name is Zenzer and Devele. This is the Breakfast Club. Today is a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes you lose count of days, especially because of the lockdown where people are working from home. So we keep encouraging people to stay at home where possible, and wear a mask. We see that the rates of COVID are going down, but we still do have cases and we still have people dying because of the COVID virus. And I think we have tried, compared to other countries, compared to other regions, we have tried to minimize the damage, but we still encourage people to stay at home if they can. I know it's difficult to stay at home because we still need to make ends meet, but wear a mask, because I think masks have proved that they can give us protection. I always find people wearing their masks and living up, and I wonder why, but people will tell you that, no, I just too much of the mask on the nose, you need oxygen. And sometimes people wear their mask and leave the nose out, and you say, then what's the purpose of the mask? So today in our Breakfast Club, we'll be talking to a former minister in the Mugabe-led government, and it was also the last political commissar before the coup. We are talking to the Honorable Saviour Kasukuwere. Some people call him Tyson, and we'll ask him why he's called Tyson, because Tyson was a boxer, and this time I've talked about Saviour Kasukuwere, and say we'll be talking about Saviour Kasukuwere, and people will say, that guy is violent. So we want to know whether he's Tyson because he's violent, or it's just a nickname that he was given. So we will be talking to him. By the way, he turns 50 today, and I would like to say to him, happy birthday to you, Babu Kasukuwere.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you very much, Sanjay.
It's only that I can't sing, but I'll try to say happy birthday to you. If you were still in government, we were going to do a gala for you, and do.
We can do an e-gala. These days, people are doing e-galas. These guys do galas, but those are a birthday.
We'll do an e-gala for you. So let me not waste time. How does 50 look like? At 50, what's your, what are you feeling? What are your thoughts?
Well, at 5, put it at 5 years old. I feel very young. I'm on the 5th floor now. So just do away with the 0 and just keep it at 5. I think it sounds very good.
Yeah, you worked with Gono when you guys were removing zeros. So I think we'll be bringing him here to try and cut zeros as well. So, it's interesting that I'm talking to you now, and you're 50, you've been in government, you've been out of government. Politically, at 50, what are your reflections?
Well, it's been a long road. It's been a long journey, trials and tribulations, good moments, low moments, high moments. It's been a journey worth it. You learn a lot over the years. You look back and say, I should have done the following, improve on the following, and it's a time for self-reflection.
So let's start from the beginning. In 1989, or way back there, you are a junior, you are in the intelligence, and you're somewhere in the border of Zimbabwe and Mozambique. How do you get there?
Well, I leave school and I get drafted into the service. I get deployed on the front line. In fact, the day I was sent there, the man in charge said to me, "You're young, but we want you to wake up a bit." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "We're going to send you where there's gunfire." So I was baptized a bit early, went into the border control operations along Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And in no time, I found myself also operating along the corridor between Beira, Chimoyo, Tumtare, and up and down for quite some time.
So there's a time, you work there, and I think you're one of the 50 people, I read that you're one of the first people to go to Gorongosa and meet Dlakama. Tell us about that.
Well, it was now during the, some of those operations remain embargoed for quite some time. But yes, indeed, during the service, we got a break through a friendly contact, and we landed in Gorongosa, had a chat with the former Renamo leader, later Faso Jakama, and his senior commanders, and got to understand where they were coming from, what their point of view was, but equally the same, we were able to see where they were headquartered. It was a total ground coverage operation. Understanding them, seeing how they're doing it, and you have to understand the organization at times that we're dealing with, and you have to be a bit more courageous. I must say it was one of those highs in my society, in my life, but equally the same, quite frightening when you have to spend the whole night because the plane couldn't take off in there, and you have to sleep, and you can't sleep with your eyes closed. You've got just to keep yourself alive throughout, because you never know what might happen. But God willing, we were able to come back the following day safe and sound. But it was a very important learning curve. Also understanding the dynamics of how organizations, especially those organizations which would be operating in the bush, behave, how they try to secure themselves, and also the thinking behind what they were trying to do. I found it quite an operation, exhilarating operation, and for me, it was, I think, the highest point in my career. And after that, I said, well, it's time to move on.
Yeah, it is during these days when you're working in Mozambique or you're deployed in Mozambique that I think you meet the men now known as Dominic Chinenge then, and the men now known as our commander, Chiwenga. I mean, when did you first meet him?
Oh, quite some time back. I would say maybe 89, thereabout. As we operated, then he was, I think, one of the generals commanding the operations in the Zimbabwe National Army. And we obviously ended up working very closely, dealing with some of these intricate issues to do with Renamo, leading to the peace negotiations, discussing with the generals on the other side, disarmament, the training programs by BMAT, and then getting BMAT across into Mozambique. And I think a lot of work was done in bringing down the tension between the Mozambican army and Renamo. And this was largely due to the personal intervention we had to do with the then General Dai and General Ngonyamo from Mozambique, from Renamo. But a lot of it is history. A lot of it is because of that work-related experience where you get to meet many people, strike a relationship, and at the end of the day, we were able to succeed as not as individuals, but as a country.
Yeah, I'll come to your relationship with Chiwenga later on, 2017. But now I want to ask, at one point, do you decide to say after, now I want to join party politics?
I got into business, I would say, we're around 94. Started a small trucking operation. And I said, well, this is the time I also decided to hang my gloves in the service and go into full-time business. It was quite, again, an experience. And then along the way, the late Bodagezi, Nicholas Koche, Mayam Chindori Chininga, James Makamba, and others said, no, look, we see potential. But obviously, having worked in a system which was very closely aligned to politics, I understood politics. I had grown up in a political family. I had seen through the struggle as a youngster. So it was not a new field to me per se. And so I immediately was asked to come and lead Mashonaland Central Province as a chairperson of the youth. I was elected in 1999, if I'm not mistaken, 1999. I became chair of the youth in the province, and that established my roots in the day-to-day politics of the party as well as the country.
At one point, you were associated with Oil, isn't it?
Yes, those are entities I set up as part and parcel of when you're growing enterprises. There was a big shortage of fuel then, around the early 2000, and we took it upon ourselves, some of the pioneer young Black business persons then, to go beyond just the pump and understand where we're getting the fuel. We did carry out some very, again, daring interventions. We brought in shiploads of product into the country and built Oil, but in no time we were put on the sanctions list. We're still there on the sanctions, but yeah, one of those things, it's about the service to the country, which we all try and do in the best possible manner.
So we basically Oil collapsed because of the sanctions issue. It's
still running, but it's still limping because of the sanctions issue. Yes, certainly the sanctions have been placed on us. It's been a huge burden. I want to admit that sanctions are a huge burden on the country, on businesses, and even on those who would have been visited by them, because they ultimately affect the flow of trade. They do quite a lot in terms of the banking sector. So it's a major challenge.
Someone said to me, can you ask Kasukuwere how different Oil was from the Tagwire's Sakunda? What would you say to that question?
Well, I don't know Tagwire's Sakunda. I think it's his operation. He's the best one who can answer that. I can't do the comparison. I think I would be best able to talk about Oil and not be drawn into talking about Tagwire Sakunda, because that's not my entity. It is Tagwire who can be able to answer that.
But during that time, did you get assistance from the state? Where you pushed, like got favors from government?
No, but you see, during those days, it wasn't. You just had to be smart enough to come up with strategies. You'd agree that many of the multinationals then were dragging their feet in terms of supporting the economy, getting the economy to work. They were also themselves not able, they didn't have the free room anymore to do as they used to. The lines of credit had been reduced, so you had to think outside the box. And what we did was to engage indigenous banks to try and raise and cobble together resources and be able to import product into the country. And I think it's one thing that we must salute the then Black indigenous businesses, especially banks, were in place because they played a pivotal role. They understood the lay of the land and were quite keen to play a positive role. We did sit down with Nigel Chanakira and agreed on how we would, Lysias Banda, how we would import product into the country with a very innovative way. We'll bring in product into Zim, get the companies which were forex, which were producing and exporting, who would then pay. And it was a very much one of those above board operations, but it didn't lean or weigh itself on the state, per se.
Yeah, you rise into politics and you become an MP. And every time when we talk about, politics, people talk about violence in Mount Darwin and all those kind of. Were you involved in violence in Mount Darwin?
To the contrary, no. In fact, the constituency that I've led, I led from 2000 until 2017, we did not lose even one person in that area. Yes, there were some sporadic cases of intra-party violence, inter-party violence, but there was nothing organized per se. Yes, we were a very strong political setup in our area, and perhaps because our people were well mobilized, those who could not come in and mobilize or get support thought we were being violent or we were engaging in violent activities. I was brought to court, I think you remember, in the year 2000, accused of violence, and those charges again fell by the wayside because there was nothing, save for when one loses, they have to find an excuse why they have lost, and that was one of the cases. But I can assure you that there was not any one individual whose life was lost in the Mount Darwin South constituency I led.
I mean, if I would say at this moment, you then become a political commissar later on, and now that you're outside the party, so to speak, and when you look back and reflect, do you think ZANU PF uses violence when in election times as a weapon to actually win the elections?
Look, I must admit that violence, unfortunately, you have cases where people have resorted to violence, and I want to say this is a feature across all the political parties. Violence has been carried out by individuals when they think they are weaker in terms of political support. To say in a nutshell, overall, that ZANU PF uses violence, I think one needs to evaluate what happened in various areas to see exactly the thinking behind. But yes, admittedly, I think there are cases where people have resorted to violent methods, and that should not be accepted. In fact, it is a wrong way of dealing with it. It is done and perpetrated by people who want to try and please their commanders or please their leaders. And I think it is a very, very unfortunate situation. And half the time, perhaps, I think it's the need for us to mature our political democratic system to a point where we must, above any element of violence, let us persuade people not use violence to try and get votes. Use violence to intimidate others, to coerce people, to do what you want. I think, yes, there are those cases have been there, and but also you have to give it to RGM then. I think there were some policy propositions they'll put on the table, which would make a difference in terms of the political outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen, I mean, over the last 2 years or so, a lot of been talking about the militarization of Zimbabwe, and you came from the intelligence yourself. And one of the questions, or one of the things that people have always talked about is that from the onset, ZANU PF has always been a military party, or that has always been led by the military. As someone who has been in the system and at one point a political commissar, what would you say about that?
The ZANU PF built as a political party initially, internally, People's Union ZAPU, a military wing, ZAPU in Zambia and ZANLA in Mozambique, to wage the armed struggle. But in the main, these political entities did persuade, apart from the fight for independence. What becomes a challenge, of course, is that as I think from 2000, that's where you see an element of the military weighing in, but for quite some time, they kept themselves in the barrack. They, apart from the statements, straitjacket and so forth, that were made thereafter, there was a very consistent view by President Mugabe that the military must not be directly involved in politics. But as time went on, you saw that military individuals became a bit more enticed or interested in politics, and they started nudging themselves in. They were political people before, the Mujurus and so forth. They would retire from the army and become full-time politicians. That is how it should be. And they would also join the ranks of the party. There's nothing that stops a military man from being a politician, for sure. But I think it makes a huge difference when the military directly gets involved in the day-to-day affairs of a political organization. I think that becomes a major problem.
Yeah, you are the political commissar when the military, or the military coup in 2017. My question to you would be, did you see that coming?
Yes, and remember I spoke about it. I think when I did make a huge intervention to say that the military must not be used in political games, let alone we should not see any cause being the way of change in the political setup of our country. We could see it as time went that members in the military service, some of individuals, were becoming too cozy. They wanted to be in the political space, and they naturally would not want to wait for their turn in terms of graduating through a political process, but the AK provide them with a very quick opportunity, like that what happened in 2017, and they find themselves in those positions of authority because they basically become a way into power, the gun. And I think the principle remains: politics should lead the gun, not the other way around.
Looking back, I mean, at that time, do you think you guys you were maybe now too comfortable? I know there was this faction that was called G40, which included you, Muzembe, Jonathan Moyo, and Joao. And at that particular time, people felt like Mapinda. I mean, looking back, do you think you could have done something different to stop the coup?
You know, Southern Africa in general has not had coups as a way of taking over power. Secondly, the AU has been very clear that coups were outlawed a long time ago. And for us, a political contestation, a political contest of ideas cannot be substituted by the use of tanks and guns. So as a political player then, I don't think the differences warranted that kind of intervention, whatever people say. But I guess they became a way for those who were in a haste, who just wanted power then, to magnify the challenges. One of the challenges that they was spoken about during the coup was that there were criminals around President Mugabe who had stolen lots of money. We had to see what has been stolen. They say that the first lady then had assumed political authority, which was far from it, and that she was making government decisions. From what I remember and what I know, decisions were made in cabinet, and that is where contestations of ideas in the political people will discuss. And if you have a better idea or a better viewpoint, you would carry the day. But yes, we could tell that there was uneasiness in individuals who were then able to mobilize, firstly, the war veterans, and then secondly, the army to overcome a political system. But it's a regrettable development, in my view. Things could have been done differently, and I still think that what happened has to be corrected. What happened cannot be a feature that remains constant because of the attendant pain it is bringing onto our people. It is not a way that we can say Zimbabwe is moving forward because we carry with us a coup background. You need to cure that kind of idea, that kind of behavior, so that from now going forward, people are able to aspire for political authority through a democratic process, through going and selling their ideas to the people, not coercing people, not using guns, not threatening people or violence.
I want to ask this question. In 2014, Mujuru was removed and replaced by Mnangagwa. Looking at back, what was your strategy when you guys decided to remove Mujuru and put Emmerson Mnangagwa?
Well, you do not have to say what was our strategy. It's not individual. I guess this is much more organizational. What happened from Juru was that they certainly were forces who felt that they wanted to make a change, were quite unhappy with certain developments within the party at that particular time. But when you want to reflect and think back, you then can appreciate that there were machinations way back that led to all that situation. And until Mujuru was removed, there was quite a lot of misinformation, quite a lot of rumor mongering, lies. I think one of the famous ones is that Mujuru had these two little, well, in the water, there were these which were fighting, Nyunguru, I don't know what to call them. And once they fought, it would mean that they've overcome each other. Mugabe will be defeated by Mujuru. There was quite a lot. And I think you have to accept that at times we did not sit back, look at the facts. There was a lot of emotional reaction to the developments, and unfortunately, the situation degenerated. And once you allow lies, once you allow misinformation to dictate how an organization moves, you might end up with very uncalled for consequences.
I mean, in your personal opinion, or as Kasukuwere, the political commissar, then who would you have preferred as the successor to Robert Mugabe?
Well, would have preferred anybody chosen by the people. I think the people should decide. The people must decide. Those who were keen to run the country, to run the party, must put themselves forward and allow the people to make a decision. The process all along had been that from the branches, from the cells, districts, people discuss about an impending political process like the Congress, and they would agree on the names. It was a very interesting contest that will be fought at the local level, and the people banded themselves together and say, we are supporting President Mugabe, his only candidate, and he'll emerge. Coming fast forward to your question, again, the president, and I can say this in my discussions with him when we went to Mexico, he had given me very clear instructions, the political commissar, that look, Kasukuwere, we now must start a process where we identify a leader who will take over, and this is the process. The party people must make a choice. And I think President Mugabe was on record saying that the leader must not come from me, but must come from the people. But certainly there were preferences. People might have chosen one person over the other, but those were personal preferences. But for me, I would come back to the integrity of the system. We must have a democratic system that yields leadership through the direct participation of members of the party.
I mean, did you have presidential ambitions yourself?
I don't want to say I didn't have. There is no teacher who doesn't want to become a headmaster. There is no lawyer or a judge who doesn't want to become the Chief Justice. Everybody in politics aspire to go to the highest level. Getting there is something else. But certainly, everyone who is in politics aspire to occupy the highest position. That's why promotions are even at work.
So we have the coup, you go back to the, I mean, you get out of the country, and maybe the story is yet to be told how you guys got out. But I want to ask, you then come back a few months later. I mean, what was the agreement when you decided to come back?
Well, I say to myself, and I want to say this today, my late mother traveled down to Joburg in late February or March 2018 and sat me down and said, listen, did you commit any crime? I said, no. Did you steal public funds? I said, no, Mama. What did you do that you should be scared of? I said, I did nothing wrong. What about all these accusations? I said, no. She said, fine. In that case, then come back home and defend yourself. I said, fine. She left, I think about 3 days earlier, and I followed. Myself and my wife said, let's go and face the music, because we believed very clearly that we had not committed any crime, and I had to face the accuser. I had said this even before I left Zimbabwe, that if anybody makes an accusation, go face it head on. So I went to court, and when I got back to Zimbabwe, I was charged for border jumping. Border jumping, I was acquitted. And I left the country, and I remained in the country, up and about doing my business. And again, I was summoned that there are no charges on the 23rd of September, 2018. I said, fine, what are the charges? They read them to me. They said, the guys, that corruption allegations, abuse of office. I said, fine, I'll come back and go to court. And I flew back to Harare, because as far as I was concerned, I was innocent. And even if, in as much as I disagreed with the system, with how things were being done, I said I'll still go and face the music, face the justice, and be exonerated. And I think I made the right decision. I was acquitted in both instances. And in terms of that, my mind and my conscience is clear.
I mean, one of the things that we have had, and that has always been repeated, was that ZANU PF uses, government parastatals to fund its activities. And in 2017, when we had those rallies that I think it's the youth rallies, where just before the coup, there were allegations that money was being taken from ZimDef and other companies to fund these rallies. You were the political commissar then. Is it true that ZANU PF is funded by government resources?
It is a fact that that ZANU PF did benefit quite a bit from that close relationship with the parastatals. They would make generous donations here and there to support the party. And in the particular case you're talking about ZimDef, we did, of course, initiate an investigation as Politburo with regards to Professor Moyo, the allegation that he had abused funds for personal use. And that investigation was done, led by Ntenda, the Speaker of Parliament, and he concluded in his report to Politburo that yes, funds had been taken, but had been used basically for party-related activities. And Dr. Chombo then did write a letter confirming that that was the case. And I think we need to be very honest about it. Nobody can deny it, that there is kind of like a blur. The party or the relationship, the party, because of its power over the years, its ability, political patronage, has had to overextend itself. Just like whenever a conference is held, a city council is invited to bring the water, and the time doesn't have to pay for it. And this is the reality of the situation. But I hope and trust that going forward, we must be able to clearly demarcate to what extent the state can benefit from, the party can benefit from state resources. And as it stands, I think there was quite a bit of state resources finding its way into political processes or political parties.
That is likely to be the trend. And do you think it is actually fair that the party benefits from state resources when these state resources are supposed to be benefiting everyone?
I think we need to draw a line in the sand and say enough of this. I think it's not right. Most of the parastatals, some of them have collapsed, and in fact, it has encouraged individuals then to abuse their positions, to steal, as they will say, we're doing it on behalf of the party, but it might end up being for personal reasons. And I think if we have to grow our economy, have transparency in terms of how we do things, that kind of behavior must be stopped forthwith.
One of the things that people have mentioned is that Kasukuwere, when he was a minister, built a very huge mansion using public funds. How did you fund your mansion?
In fact, it's very interesting. They say it's a very huge mansion. It's a reasonably sized house. I've run businesses. I have a business myself, but the financial institutions, CABs, can attest to each and every cent that we borrowed from them, and we use those funds to build. You go to a building society, and if you're bankable, they'll lend you the funding. All the houses in Harare have been built by individuals in their different circumstances. But in our case, myself and my wife and the family went and borrowed from the Central African Building Society, and we built that using funds borrowed from the Building Society. And we're still paying back the loan.
You were also a strong advocate for the indigenization, and people were thinking that you are doing that for a personal gain so that you can also take companies and indigenize. Did you benefit personally from the indigenization?
I'm sure if I had benefited from this indigenization process, I would have been arrested. Coming to just observing the number of people who were either angry or are not happy with the need to democratize the economy. I think if I'd done that, I would have been behind bars. They would have said, Kasukuwere did this, he told this. Let me put it to you that for me, it was a principle, it was a policy that had been agreed to by the party, that was the law. In fact, the law, the empowerment law, chapter 1433, was steered through parliament by Chitamasa. And Mangwana was the Minister of Indigenization then. And when I came in, the assignment by the president was that this is an act of parliament. This is some of the acts we're handing over to you. You've got to implement this. And I did really agree with the policy. The need to have the economy widened, have our people benefit, communities benefit from the resources that they have, as akin to a situation where there are islands of prosperity and seas of poverty. You see, there's a huge mine here, producing very well, be it in Marange and so forth, and they're making money, and the community do not even have access to water. These are some of the things that we try to address. But of course, there are powerful groups that exist in our country who will never want to see that happen. Look at how the law was put aside, and to the extent that to this day, even communities who had done exceedingly well in terms of their ownership and participation in the mines. In fact, even the companies themselves were quite happy. Most of the companies from South Africa had seen huge shareholdings being given to local communities in South Africa. And they were very happy to do the same in Zimbabwe, including the workers, including management. And this is what President Mugabe had said to us: go ahead and make sure that the three categories, the communities, the workers, and of course, at the national level, we do benefit from our resources. That had been agreed. That was the position in cabinet. But today, huge deposits of platinum, huge deposits of coal are given to individuals and nothing benefiting the local community. It is something that once you plant it, it will work against us in the future. We must democratize the economic ownership in our country.
Yeah, I mean, before I move on, there is something that I just remember. During the days of the coup, I think when you guys had left, there was a video that was circulating, and it showed, I mean, the destruction that was at a place that is alleged to have your house. And there was this person who kept on saying, we end up with ATM, you know, and they also, people were talking about that they failed to go through because the house was bulletproof. Is this your house with ATMs, bulletproof, you know, the lifts? You know, because I'm asking that because at one point you said your house is just reasonably small.
The hardened glass at my house, it's just another type of glass. It's hardened glass. You find that in the shops. The armor that was used at times was quite strong. It perforated some of the glass, and at times it couldn't get in. That was it. That's God's will that we survived. They obviously did not come there to give us flowers. They wanted to deal with us in one or the other. In fact, I think we should have left there in body bags, but this is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, let's now you come to Zimbabwe. You talked about what's happened, but you leave. Why did you leave?
The question of security becomes a major source of concern for us, for my family as well, and at an individual level. You can't stay and continue to stay where you can see imminent danger against you. There was moments that you could almost tell that if you remain here, things might turn out very bad.
I mean, recently we had Chinamasa saying you have written to the party and you want to come back, you and your brothers. Do you want to go back to Zambia?
Chinamasa is, I think, is getting a bit challenged, I think, in terms of how he comprehends or handles issues. I would not have wanted at this point in time to go into detail in terms of the intervention that me and some of our comrades are seeking from our regional friends and liberation movements in terms of resolving the Zimbabwean question. I think it is an admitted fact that not all is well in Zimbabwe. There is a lot that must be done to bring about peace and stability in our country, what is affecting the common man in our country. It is not about going back to Zanu PF. It is not about, no letter has been written to Zanu PF about that. In any case, how do I write a letter to a process that we contest. First and foremostly, we do not recognize that even the way the Central Committee was convened on the 19th of November, which subsequently, Shinamasa says, gave us the SEC, it was done outside the law. That was forced upon the membership of the party. So what we have put on the table is that there is an illegality, and that illegality has to be cured. And I think in your interviews earlier on, you did ask me about this illegality. And I said to you, there is a serious illegality that must be dealt with at a party level, at a national level. Because once you accept that this illegal behavior is okay, it becomes national behavior, and don't complain when things go wrong. So what we have simply raised, and we are raising issues of principle, that the ouster of President Mugabe, our ouster, was done in a manner that is now self-reflective in terms of how people are being treated in Zimbabwe. And this must be dealt with. Look at the pain and suffering of our people. We can't divorce ourselves. We are leadership. And as leadership, we must be able to deal with these questions and issues on a day-to-day basis. And when we raise them because we want Zimbabwe to succeed. Shinamasa wants to reduce a national issue to a personal issue. It is far from that.
So I just want, from this interview, I want everyone who has this question answered. If I were to ask you to say yes or no, I would say, do you want to get back to ZANU PF? Yes or no?
I've given you a very clear answer. In the first instance, did we leave ZANU PF? What is ZANU PF really today? There is the ZANU PF, which is the armed one. The ZANU PF, which has not got the legitimacy of the people. When you talk about ZANU PF, think about the idea. I subscribe to the revolutionary behavior, thinking of ZANU PF of the past, of the Mugabe era, which put the people first and the gun last. Going back to ZANU PF is for you and I, is it going back to the current system as it is? It's a big no.
So you want to challenge the way you were, basically fired from the party?
We are basically putting on the table that, is this the norm? We have raised the question to say, do you use guns? Do you fire and hire using tankers? When somebody is running for their lives, you are holding a central committee meeting, and then you say, this person has been fired. Is that the way? Because the integrity of any process has a bearing on how that organization behaves going forward. So if we do not challenge, if we do not question, if we do not put right what went wrong, even in ZANU PF, you are likely to see a repeat of this behavior at the national level. And even as we head for 2023, if you institutionalize a wrong behavior from day one, it becomes a permanent feature.
One of the accusations is that you're actually working, or you're going to ANC and bad-mouthing Zimbabwe, or talking bad about Zimbabwe. I mean, is that true?
I'm a Zimbabwean, first and foremostly, a very patriotic one. I don't have to bad-mouth anybody. What I'm saying here is what I'll say anywhere else. I don't have to bad-mouth my country. I think, like you, Commissar, we all dearly love our country. We want our country to succeed. There is pain in our society. There is pain in our country. Our people are living without something to eat on a daily basis. 6.8 million people are on the verge of starvation this year, according to WFP. The hospitals have been down, unemployment, the youth are suffering, and it is there for all of us to see. We should not take any discussion, any need for mediation as a sin to say you are doing it because you went bad-mouth the country, you don't want so and so. No, 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 no. It's about our country together. Zimbabwe is as mine as it is yours. And rather than spend our time quarreling, let us come together and resolve the questions, the issues that are present day, and have a better nation. Our people think, and we all hope, we can have a better country. But to keep it going as it is, I think that's being very dishonest to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I would have time to just allow one or two questions before we end. But now, do you want, the other question is, do you want to come back to Zimbabwe at one point?
Zenzele, that question, you are in Zimbabwe. I would love to be in Zimbabwe. And I'm sure many thousands of our people want to be back in Zimbabwe. It's not all about me. Everybody who has Zimbabwe as their home love to be in Zimbabwe. And this is why at a leadership level, we must question ourselves. Are the conditions present in our country where arrest can be done and somebody is not given bail for 45 days just because I've arrested this person? There is too much of fixing each other. I want to deal with you. I have a grudge with you. That is not helpful. At the leadership level, we must allow to say, let bygones be bygones. Let's play by the book. Let's respect the rules of our country. Let's do things correctly. It should not be about capturing institutions and getting institutions to do what you want. It must be about driving a developmental agenda for the betterment of all our people. Coming to Zimbabwe anytime, and I'll be coming to Zimbabwe. But we need to be able to eliminate some of the dangers that are existent in our society.
Yeah, you're talking about eliminating some of the dangers. How do you intend to do that?
Well, when we engage regional friends, when we engage to say, let us have a Zimbabwe that is on the path to growth and stability, these are some of the issues that we are raising. It's about the political issues. It's about some of the military issues that we've been discussing. We need to certainly ensure that the military goes back to the barracks, allow a democratic process, allow things to happen normally. You do not have to be forcing people to do what you want. And I do not think that is what the general membership in ZANU PF believe in. People go and mobilize, go and sell your ideas. We do not want a situation where guns are used to sell ideas.
Earlier on, we touched on your relationship with Chiwenga when you were back in Mozambique. I mean, fast forward to 2020. Currently, what's your relationship with Chiwenga?
I haven't spoken to him. I haven't seen him.
So there is no communication between you and Chiwenga?
How do you communicate? I communicate with you, Zenzele.
I mean, I'm asking because there has been allegations that, I mean, you are in talks with Chiwenga, probably is the middleman when you were talking about coming back to Zimbabwe.
That's why I've answered you. That no.
So it's not true?
It's not true.
We have seen the movement, I mean, posters around Tyson Wabantu. Tell us about that. Are you setting your own political party?
But if you listen to the young people behind the Wabantu movement, these are young people who say, we believe in Tyson, we support him, we want him to be in leadership in our country. These are people who we have worked together, we have expressed their desire through coming together and also speaking to me about the need to be in politics. Perhaps they felt that I want to hang up my boots in politics and came to encourage me to remain in the political field in our nation.
Okay, I have a question here that says, I mean, now I'm going to pick one or two questions from the people, and we will end the interview. It's a birthday today, so we need to give you time to celebrate. It says,
sure, but it's a good time to answer the questions.
Okay, so first and foremost, someone also, the first question is about your mansion. People are saying, I mean, the question is, ask him to affirmatively say, did he loot state resources to build his mansion?
If there is any way I looted state resources, can I be given the charge of what I looted, where I looted, and how much I looted? I have told you, Zenzele, if you want the paperwork for how I did build my house, how I borrowed the money from the Central African Building Society, I will be able to give you that anytime.
Okay, the other question is, we go back to the issue of the party benefiting from the state resources. And the question is that, is it true, as reported in the media, that you as the commissar, you actually wrote to the Minister of Higher Education, which was Professor Jonathan Moyo, then to give money from ZimDef to buy computers for a program that involved the First Lady in the center?
Sorry, can the question come again? Who is sent that question?
The question is, as the person who was the political commissar then, did you actually instruct the Minister of Higher Education to give money from ZimDef to buy computers for the first lady?
No. That's I think that's a bit inaccurate. What I did say was that there were quite a lot of cross pollination of relationship between government departments and the party. And I think in many instances, there were those desires or requests by the party whenever they went, but obviously that could not be reduced to writing. But like I did answer to you, that the party did acknowledge and wrote, and I think Dr. Chombo did write, after an extensive investigation by Advocate Ndenda, that the funds that had been consumed from ZimDef and what they had been used for, they had been used in activities that were related to the party. I think that was very clear and it is there.
So it's, I mean, the media reports that actually stated that you personally wrote, the letters to the ministry.
I haven't seen those media reports. I would love to have a look at those media reports.
Okay. The other question is, what is your view on the alleged, turf war between Emmerson Mnangagwa and Chiwenga?
Well, I don't have a view on it, because if they have a turf war, it is an individual turf war between the two of them. It would again be unfair for me to go into an area which I'm least exposed to, or let alone I'm not a direct participant in their conflict. If there's a conflict, I think it's something that either of them should be able to respond.
If you were to come back in politics in Zimbabwe and find yourself in power, what would you do differently?
I think, Zenzele, our nation is in deep pain. We need to unite our people. We need to look at the past. Where did we go wrong? Put those things right. Put the country on a growth trajectory. Start looking to the future. We need to start a process that Zimbabwe is a place for Zimbabweans. Zimbabwe is a place that we all must enjoy, and we must build it. People must work hard for the country. People must love their country. People must be proud of their country. There's a great foundation that has been built for our country in terms of education, the health infrastructure. We need to build on that and move Zimbabwe forward. We cannot have Zimbabwe as a beggar, Zimbabwe unable to look after her children, Zimbabwe with millions of our countrymen making a living below their capacities, or not in terms of their, most of them are educated outside the country. We need them back in the country to all give a hand and push our nation forward. Zimbabwe can be a country that is an oasis of peace and happiness.
Before the coup, when you were the Minister of Local Government, and one of the things that people have always said, we had a chance to deal with corruption at local government level, and nothing much was done. What would be your answer to
that? You don't deal with corruption at an individual level. Corruption should be handled at an institutional level. All institutions in our country, including the local authority, there are enough checks and balances of how to handle these issues. But it is an admitted fact that in the local government sector, we have allowed, unfortunately, quite a lot of things going out of hand in terms of how land must be distributed, how the housing situation must be handled, because over a time, there's been limited investment in that sector. And because of that, we have now seen a proliferation of corruption. During our time, we did the best that we could to look at the institutional integrity of our local authorities. It is not a Kasukuwere issue to be fighting corruption and fighting individuals. It must be about our institutions all being able to play their part in terms of the checks and balances and ensure that we eliminate shortcuts. What is killing our local authorities is again a question that we try to address at the ministry level. Let's perhaps have a look at the Urban Councils Act, tweak around the qualifications of who become a councillor. I think democracy has unfortunately yielded for us a situation where people with least times capacity or least means of production just wake up as a councillor or as a mayor, and certainly they want to first of all feed themselves. It's a discipline issue that is really affecting our councils, and it also goes back to the political parties. How much do the political parties place in terms of how do they value society, how do they value our people, and what skills must we put forward to run our local administrations?
Looking back in your time in ZANU PF and or up to now, what do you regret?
Sorry, again? Come again.
I mean, looking back in your role as a political commissar, a minister, an MP, a member of the youth in ZANU PF, what do you regret?
Well, there will be lots who will spend all day here. There are regrets and positive developments. I think what I do regret is, of course, that there is a lot that we should have done, which we didn't do.
What is one of those things that you think you should have done and you didn't do?
Maybe we should have done much more in terms of the empowerment of our young people in the country. We should have done more for the small miners. I think very strongly about the small miners because I'm quite disturbed when I read reports of majority of our young miners who are being trapped in the mines, very little in terms of help to try and extricate them. And I think we have allowed that illegality to persist for much more longer than it should have. We should have done much better in terms of legalizing this sector and also protecting the individual players, especially the Zimbabweans, from exploitation by foreigners.
And what do you think is in the future for Zimbabwe? How do we solve the Zimbabwean problems as you see them now? And we've talked a lot about this Zimbabwean problem. In your own view, how do people solve the issues in Zimbabwe so that we go back to a normal country?
We first of all must love our people. Whoever is in leadership must love the people of Zimbabwe. Put aside your personal ego. Put aside your anger with individuals. Love every one of the Zimbabweans. And that's the beginning. We must love one another. We must be one. As they would say, Simunye, we need to retrace our steps. We are too angry with each other. We are too much vindictive of each other. If you can feel the pain at an individual, you must then say, what about the other person? Zimbabwe is unity. Let's unite our people. With the first thing that we need on the table is unity. Put the difference aside, just hammer out an accord in terms of unity. Let us unite as Zimbabweans and build our country.
The other question that keeps coming there have been lots of more than 10 questions now about reports that you were personally involved in violence in Mount Darwin, and someone is saying you ran torture youths in Mount Darwin. Is that true?
No, it's not true. Torture youths. How do you run torture youths?
You ran torture camps.
Even the way the question is crafted is done by somebody who's trying to make political capital out of lying.
So you were never involved personally in the violence. You didn't run torture camps in Mount Darwin.
How do I run torture camps? Who was tortured by me? Who was tortured by who?
I mean, there's, like I said in the beginning when I was introducing my program, that whenever when I was advertising this program, people kept on talking about the violence in Mount Darwin, and there's someone who was actually talking about, there were houses that were burned by youths who were directly under your control. I mean, were you? I mean, like I said before, were you involved?
Why don't I challenge you, my dear good brother? To one of these good days, go to Mount Darwin, South constituency, carry out an independent evaluation, investigation, And obviously, those who have the V11s can favor you with the places or individuals who are affected, and then we can have a better discussion thereafter.
Okay, so it's at least I hope this question will come to an end, because whenever we talk about you coming back, or we see posts about you in becoming back to politics, people say, but he was part of the violence. What is he going to change now?
That's why I've challenged you, my dear brother, that I think you are very independent. You come with a very strong background in terms of human rights, which is something I ascribe to and subscribe to in a very big way. Do me a favor, go out there to Mount Darwin South and check around, and we can begin our debate from there henceforth.
I promise you that I'm going to ask about those issues, and I hope to invite you whenever I get something that people would say, and this what happened. We have talked, as we go to our conclusion, you talked about the illegality and the coup, and talking about queuing the coup. And one of the questions is, why didn't you guys legally challenge the process how you were expelled from the party, now that you're saying you were not really properly expelled from the party, if ever there is any way of properly expelling someone?
You see, I always look at what history has taught us. At what point do you get the law on your side, especially when you have a system which is desirous to protect their turf? Are you sure that you can go to the court today as it is and put up that case and win it? Are you sure you can challenge the coup in a court of law when the courts actually pronounce themselves just a few days after the coup that no, this was a very legal process? How do you start from there? I think people go to court for different reasons, but in politics, you don't really need to go to court. You play it in the political court. The political court is where we continue to engage, and until we agree. If you can't take politics to court. This is politics. There was a coup, and the coup masters made sure that the judge president pronounced himself on that position, that there was no coup. Everything was about the Constitution. When you fully know that the Constitution has only one person, the commander-in-chief, who deploys the troops. So where do you start? And anyway, how do you expect a judge who overnight is being guarded by the same soldier or who carried out the coup to pronounce himself differently? Just imagine. Do me a favor. You need to read some of the history or legal history, and it will show you that it's not easy for judges to make certain pronouncements.
Is that an admission that you're actually engaging the current government or the current ZANU PF leadership?
No. I said, when we say politics, I think I did explain to you how we are dealing with these issues of illegality. That this is politics. We must ensure that we play the politics and get our political system reorganized and be able to serve everybody. But to expect me to go to court to put forward a political argument of this nature, there are very few chances of you winning that kind of argument in terms of how we are constituted. Read the Matzimba case. It will show you how it's not easy to overturn a system which is in charge.
Lastly, we have seen the recalling of MPs by the coup faction and the whole thing that is going in the MDC. If you were to advise the opposition, what would you say?
See, again, politics is about the people. Nelson must take the game back to the people. He must go back to the people. The courts, he will continue. Let the people make the decisions. It is about the people voting. It is the verdict that will come from the people. Now, if, for instance, they go for these by-elections and a determination is made by the people, it will make all those who are making those decisions think about it twice again. Because as it stands, the people's will or people's decision is being undermined on a daily basis. Yes, we do respect our courts. They are trying to do the best that they can, but at times you ask yourself, did people vote for coup? And I think the answer is no. And for coup to walk in and say, I now the president of this party, MDC Alliance, because Madame Coupe, I think at the personal level, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't just take such a position because I know for a fact that I got 43,000 votes. Why would I want to take over an institution that somebody has built? We all know what the game at play, and that's why I say, at the end of the day, do you get your best result out of the courts, or it's a political game?
Finally, what is your future politically?
At 50, it's game on.
Yes, expand on that.
When I say game on, we're still in the game. Who quits at 50? At 70, yes, you should retire. But at 50, you must be in. Why should one quit politics at this hour?
So are we likely to see you as a candidate in 2023?
You're likely to see me in politics.
Yes, is Tyson Wabantu back in Zanu PF or another political party?
Saviour Kasukuwere in politics.
Okay, we will leave it that, and definitely you have confirmed you are still interested in politics, and you come back to Zimbabwe one form or the other. And 2023, Saviour Kasukuwere will be in politics. Thank you very much for taking your time. I know we could not ask questions from everyone because they were coming thick and fast. So those that we managed to ask, and hope people got or their questions were answered. But I also hope to engage you as we go on. There's still a lot of issues that we have to discuss. You answered some of the questions truly like an intelligence officer, but it was nice engaging you, and hope to talk to you. And lastly, happy birthday, and we hope you're going to have a good 50th birthday. My name is Zenzel, and this was a Breakfast Club. Have a good day.